can't say, I want to be this incredible athlete when your body's not built like that, or I want to be this incredible salesperson when you're really good at a different skill.
Sure.
And so building the skill that you have and continually saying, like what you were saying, I'm better than what I was, and that's what you want to kind of compare yourself to. That can be a helpful internal drive that helps you to. So the comparison with others is an external drive, so that helps you to look at others and go, oh, I'd like that. But the internal drive is that internal voice of saying, I want to be the best version of myself that I can be.
Yeah.
Hey legends, Damian here, the creator and founder of Apex Unleashed. Really looking forward to you today, to seeing today's episode, and hopefully for you, it's the gateway for you finding out a little bit about yourself, how you can help you move forward with your goals, hopes and dreams.
Hello everybody, it's Damian here from Apex Unleashed again. I'm here with Merie Burton. Welcome, thank you for having us today. Just for our listeners, just give a little bit of an idea about what you do from a professional standpoint. Is that obviously you provide a lot of counselling services for people. We're here today to talk about the art of communication. You've been in the industry a long time, and communication is a huge part in everyone's relationships, business, and there's, I suppose, a lot of key nuggets that we're going to find today. But just a little bit of background on yourself, and so how did you get into the industry and what drew you to this profession?
Well, I love people and I love helping people, so that's a big thing. And I love communicating with people. So a big part of my job is listening and talking. And so I got into this because somebody helped me. So I went and saw a counsellor, and I thought, I came away from that thinking I want to help people like that person helped me.
Yeah. And that's an amazing thing, is that we're all in business and we're all doing things that's not just to serve ourselves. One of the conversations I had with a previous podcast was talking about if you're just doing it for you, it doesn't feel right sometimes. So we talked about it before we went on to the podcast about authenticity. Sometimes when we talk about what I know personally when it comes to communicating with people, is that sometimes we're, from a sales perspective, we're talking about scripts and dialogues and we're getting told what to say. We talked about the key word authenticity, and that'll probably be our word of the day. What's authenticity sort of come across like in communication? Because when it doesn't feel like it's genuine and coming from the heart and coming from a space of, I suppose, from my perspective, of that doesn't come across or sound right, people don't like to be questioned about their integrity and get triggered a lot about authenticity. So when it comes to communication, how do you feel that authentic part when it's not in someone? Why is it so obvious? Why does it seem people pick up on it so quickly? It's a loaded question, and you've got a lot of experience. You can go a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I have. Well, what I was thinking with authenticity is that we need to be true to ourselves, and being true to ourselves starts with our core values. So what kind of person do I want to be? Nobody else is in control of that. That is up to the individual. And then the other part of that is this thing that we have in the therapy industry, and in a lot of industries actually, in people helping industries, beneficence and non-maleficence, which basically means do no harm to nobody else and make sure it benefits someone else. So in the art of being authentic with somebody, with yourself, you need to make sure, well, I'll speak for me, I make sure that I am both being kind, generous, respectful to somebody else, and making sure I'm being true to myself. So being true to myself in the form of that, if that means I'm going to harm someone, that wouldn't feel true to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose when we communicate that, whether it's our non-verbal communication, what we say, the interpretation of what I said was this, but what I meant was that, because we're impacting other people, I suppose that comes up for me on a daily basis, is that you can tell when you've said something that someone goes, they pause, or there's a facial expression. And whenever we talk to someone and there's a conversation that comes up and you're just like, oh, that didn't feel right. There's probably a little bit of that there, because your intent isn't to ever say something or communicate to a loved one that's meant to be hurtful, but there's a defensiveness, there's different things come up. And I suppose we'll start with the obvious one, is that there seems to be, and we'll talk sales for a second, that fear of rejection. So I make a call, someone tells me that they don't want my service or they're not interested in what I've got, and then they keep harbouring that and they feel that. So difficult conversations get built up in your mind where it's just a conversation. So I know one of the things that I spoke about before the podcast was talking about, you've got a great website that talk about, a different perspective. So when you hear that in a sales profession about I pause to go and communicate with people because I worry about the outcome, how would you give that person a different perspective?
I would think that empathy is a really good tool. So listening to what the other person wants and hearing how their perspective is, but then also not coming across saying my perspective is the correct perspective, which therefore makes your perspective the wrong perspective. So going into the conversation with a person with the belief that this is just another perspective, not the right perspective.
Yeah, sure.
Therefore, your perspective is neither right nor wrong.
Yeah. And I suppose the thing that comes up for me and what I want to talk to our listeners about is that, the example, whether you can call it, I think the calling one's the obvious one in a sales role, is that the projection you give to someone is that if you're providing information, sometimes if that perspective isn't what they want, it doesn't mean that what you're doing is a terrible thing or you're hoping that there's a different outcome. It's that you're just providing the information you have. I suppose the one that I always look at, unpacking when it comes to building relationships with clients or, progressing when you talk about friendships and personal relationships and building trust and those relationships is how do we, when we meet someone, have this thing where I feel like I've known that person, and there's other people where you talk to them, you're like, oh, you're a bit guarded. So do you think that's more of that empathetic sort of nature where you talk about listening? So listening is amazing because when you work in a sales role, you're talking, trying to get information, but what's actually being heard. So what is it from I suppose a professional standpoint is that listening piece in when you're first communicating with someone, when you're starting a relationship, how important is this not so much to repeat what they say, but to give a hey, I've heard what you said. Or how important is that real first meeting about that? And why do you think people sort of, in this day and age, this face-to-face conversation gets a little bit harder now? Do you think there's something that correlates there with the listening and going, this is what I've heard you've said? People don't feel like they're being listened to. That's my overwhelming sentiment.
Yeah, it's very important in sales, in any conversation, for people to feel like you get me, you understand me, you're following me. And one of the ways that you said that you can do that is to repeat what the person's saying so that they hear that you've heard them. And then empathy is really important, basically saying I'm feeling what you're feeling, I'm understanding what you're feeling. And the other part of what you were saying there about the face-to-face. So we have these things called mirror neurons where people can pick up our energy. They can pick up whether we're being genuine, whether we're following them, whether we're nervous, whether we're angry. And so customers can feel that. Clients can feel that. And so that's why it's very important as the speaker to calm yourself internally, slow down your speaking, get in contact with that genuine part of yourself so that the person, the client, the customer, the listener can pick that up and feel that there's a genuine connection.
And how profound is that we've all been in a conversation with someone, and even at the grocery store, and you have that conversation like, that was a really positive conversation. And it's just one of those things is that the abundance of information is around now. And it's the action or the absence of action that cause people to feel like the way they communicate, because we use text message, we use email, we try to avoid every part of the conversation outside of talking face-to-face.
You can't read empathy behind a screen, so you can only read empathy when you're looking at a person's face, and that's why people can be quite mean.
Trolling online.
So when you're sitting with a person, you can read through empathy whether someone is upset, nervous, following you, tracking you, connecting with you. So this day and age can be a bit dangerous for that genuine connection when we're just sitting behind a screen.
And that's why we do this podcast, not just as an audio, as a video, because I want people to not just hear what's being said, but to see the interactions and get a good understanding. And, you know, I've just been given an affirmation about the positivity about this forum is harder to set up. There's a lot more editing. There's a lot more that goes into it than just as press record, let's just chat. But I feel like for us and to communicate and for our listeners to hear is that we're getting more information that I know with videos. I listen to videos that I look at. If I'm just have my ears in what do you call it? I have an earpiece in, or I'm listening to something on Bluetooth in the car, and you drop in and out of the conversation. I feel like that concentration level is really in there as well. So, look, I know it's easy to ask the questions. Is that so? Relationships are about, and I'll ask you to finish that sentence. Is that when it comes to communication, like we have relationships with so many different people, and one of the things that I really find fascinating around human behaviour is that we talk about relationships over time build trust. So what does that look like in a professional, personal sense for you? Is that what does that sound like to you as we all evolve and we mature? Is that not just that communication piece, but those relationships that are forming? How important is it to sort of, I suppose, move from just a hey, how are you, to having dinner with someone, spending quality time with them, like that involvement of relationships? Over the years, you've seen a lot of it. What does that look like to you in a sense of people who they just seem to have good relationships with everyone? There's no one single thing, but what do you think it is?
Connection, genuine connection, authenticity, empathy, the ability to not think one's own perspective is the right perspective, so being curious and open to other people's perspective. So part of my job is to build what we call therapeutic alliance, and that's an art. So what that means is, and so that would be in all industries. So the alliance is basically saying, I'm with you, I'm for you, so I'm not against you. I want to give you something. So in some industries, it's I want to sell you something. I want to get a product to you because I want to help you. In my industry, it's I want to understand you so that I can help you get what it is that you want. And so that kind of relationship means I need to be genuinely empathetic with that person. I need to be congruent with myself, and I need to have an acceptance and an understanding of that other person. That's really fascinating. I suppose I was going to ask one of these questions a bit further down, but you've already gone into it in a little bit of I suppose inadvertently, is that all sounds like a trust mechanism. Trust is massive.
And we build up trust by a bunch of little activities and things such as, hey, can you go to the shop and get me that? I'll call you at this time. I'll drop this off and do that. Like all those little bits are trust exercises that over time is that when I need something from you, you'll be there. Is that there's no quick and easy way to build that trust and connection. And why is it that some people just have that and other people they get very closed off and I suppose isolate themselves? And we talk about the COVID life in 2020. Is that something that you've seen? Is that people are closing off much quicker than what they used to because they're finding it harder to connect and build trust with and establish trust, I suppose, and connect with people in this day and age with limited contact?
When there's a lot of unknown. So COVID has meant that there's a lot of unknown and
brought a lot of stuff to the surface
that we aren't in control of. And so it's for many of us, the protection mechanism is to say, I'll put a wall up, I won't trust others, I'll stay within my bubble because that's something I can control.
Sure.
And so it is a level of vulnerability to say, I'm going to reach out and allow someone to build some trust with me. And so depositing that trust, and so consistency is important. Safety is really important for a person. Security, so letting a person know that you're safe and secure with me. I will consistently do what it is that I say that I'm going to do, and that builds trust.
And how is it that, not forgetfulness, I suppose, but if you say you're going to do something, do it as a basic form. And for everyone out there, is that how many times have we all gone somewhere or someone said they were going to do something and didn't, how did it make you feel? You don't want to be that person on the other side that is forgetful, that is, you don't want to be considered thoughtless because it's not at the front of your mind. Sometimes there's a lot of things going on for people. From that empathetic standpoint, and I suppose asking for clarity here, and especially for our listeners, is that how do people overcome those setbacks? So, I'll just finish, because you said about people's perspective and about themselves, like you help them understand what they want. How many times have people go, I actually don't know what I want because they're not sure, and they just lead themselves down different paths, and they're not really, I suppose, aligned with their journey. So how do people help themselves get back to deal with those setbacks?
So testing and measuring is something a person can do. So test, am I trustworthy? And then measure that. So that would be, I'm forgetting things, and people are saying I'm not trustworthy. And so therefore a person can say, okay, I'm aware that I'm doing that. So I've tested that and I've measured that. And then to set yourself up for success. So if I want to be consistent and I want to be reliable, then setting reminders on my phone, writing lists of things, asking others, recruiting others in to help me to do what it is that I say that I'm going to do. They're all things that you can do to help yourself to be consistent and trustworthy.
So guys, it's everything to do with your actions moving forward, not doing it to try and appease that person that you might feel like you've let down. Because if you're just trying to do things to serve other people in the absence of trying to make them happy, you are going to have the absence of making them happy because it's your actions that made that situation. 100% responsibility is a word that, a phrase that comes up is that you must take 100% responsibility for who you are. Is that when people start doing those things, they feel like, I've been doing these things consistently, I've been good, why am I still getting that friction or things still don't feel aligned to me? I suppose I know myself, I look for reassurance when I don't have that. What's another way people can look at a perspective and what way people can see that and be like, well, what's another course of action I can continue to take? Because it's going to help you feel better as a person.
I think reading the other person. So if, for instance, it's a relationship with a long-time committed person, then if they're consistently giving you feedback that you're letting me down, you're not doing that thing, then rather than coming from a defensive place, go to the core values of things like, I want to be trustworthy, I want to be loving, I want to be connected, I want to be kind. And so even though that might create a little bit of defensiveness in us at first, if we come from that grounded place where we say, okay, I don't want to harm you, I want to benefit you, I want to be connected to you, I want to be trustworthy, you're giving me feedback that's telling me that I can do better on that. So I can take that as good communication, I'll do that. So you're actually helping me rather than, because our first port of call might be defensiveness. I haven't done what I said I was going to do. But if we come from that place, then that just creates a loop, and that's always someone else's responsibility. So then when we become defensive, we make it the other person's responsibility. Then we're in trouble. Whereas if we say, okay, it's my responsibility, I want to be responsible for being loving, caring, trustworthy, a good partner. So that gives you a sense of control over taking 100% responsibility.
And look, I think you guys will have to pause right there, go back and listen to that a couple of times, because there's quite a number of components in there that you've got to look at. Is that I'm a bit blown away, I'll be honest, is that we feel like if it takes, there's an instant, a moment where something happens and things aren't well, and we have this, I don't know if it's a false expectation or, well, if I just do the right thing from now on, then that event won't impact us moving forward. People need time to process. How do we communicate with people who need that time to process? Is that this just needs to be something that gets dealt with at another time? Is there a way we can communicate that without it being so, like you say, you talk about defensiveness? Is there a strategy people might have to look at?
There is something that both parties need some time out in that space. So if if you become defensive, then that's a cue that you need a little bit of space because you're going away from your core values of being respectful and kind and caring. And so in couples therapy, I call that tap out rule, where you can say, what I need to do right now is I want to be the most loving, kind, genuine, authentic self. And I'm not going to be that right now because I'm feeling defensive, which is a normal human response. There's no need to be ashamed about being defensive. And so then you can communicate with the other. I just need to think about this for a minute. I want to come from my best self. I will come back within 10, 20, 30 minutes. And then we'll have another conversation where I'm feeling more grounded, not as defensive.
Sure. And obviously, if you get that wall and that barrier, and it's like, I don't want to talk about this, and it goes on, say, a sustained period of time, and say it's not with a loved one that you talk to them every day, and there's distance of time. So it might be 2 or 3 months. And that interaction, it's almost like they're waiting for you to spark something up. I know in my experience, if you've had a conversation that didn't go well, the best thing you can do is just, hey, how are you? How you been? Because that just brings I suppose, that anxiety of, is this conversation going to be a conflict? And why do we let things go like that? It's because we don't want to deal with them, or
it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it's painful, and sometimes if we're still in that defensive mode, we want the other person to take responsibility for our reaction. But going forward in a genuine way, connection, it's about connection. So if your core values are, I want to be connected with other people, then that's the place that you're going to come from, rather than I want to be right. So if you want to be right, you just defend.
Yeah. And for those people that do want to be right, what are they getting out of it? Because
sense of power.
Oh, okay, because they know that that's made that person feel whatever they're feeling, and they can see it. But that makes them not whole, but makes them feel like, okay, cool, that's dealt with, and they just go on about their day not realising the impact they've left behind. So we are powerful in how we communicate in that sense. And that person that gets left behind and comes and talks to someone like yourself, they've got to work on interacting with that person again sometimes, to be like, maybe it's important to them to say, hey, that was how I felt, this didn't serve me, because it's so awkward. We sort of then we separate, we steer clear from those people. If
it's a toxic relationship, so if it's a person that...
Say it's a boss, for instance, because the common one that we have is that we've got clients, employees, employers. They're long-going relationships that there's natural fallouts. Because you're so busy doing activities, you actually don't have time to dwell on it and to actually address it. Just be like, oh, how's such and such? You're like, oh, I don't really talk to that person. How do people deal with that interaction, especially in a hierarchy? This is a tough one in this day and age. Everyone wants to be their own boss. They want to be online. They want to be at home doing their own thing. But they're in a hierarchy, and they want all the good stuff and the accountability when it comes up. It's like, I don't want to deal with that. So how does that emotion sort of work for people in this day and age who don't communicate the issues?
So are you talking the person who's actually pushing people away, or are you talking about the person who wants to connect with that person?
The person that's trying to connect to sort of get an understanding of just, or to be like, I want to be able to not have this perception in my mind that you and I don't get on well, or there's a conflict, especially in a small workplace.
So you can't control what someone else thinks. They may always think that you're not a nice person, so you can't control that, but you can control how you respond to that person treating you a certain way. So again, empathy, connection, tracking the person. So if you feel that the person's pushing you away, you don't want to push yourself onto them, but you certainly want to let them know, I see you, I want to understand you. So talking about them sometimes, so what did you do on the weekend, what's important to you? So you're really trying to help them feel important, connected.
Wonderful.
And that requires us to get out of our ego. So if our ego's in the way, we'll say, I'm more important, this is about power. And oftentimes when there's hierarchy, it is about power. And so
I can influence your employment and things like that. People have that thread over them, or that perception that's there.
But a truly powerful person, so an empowered person is a truly powerful person. They're equal with everyone, regardless of what position this person puts themselves in.
Leaders versus managers.
So to be empowered with a boss who might be, or a staff member who might be lording it over you, or treating you in a way that is quite power dominant, to be humble, to be respectful, to be kind, to be compassionate is often a more empowering response to somebody rather than trying to struggle for power, because particularly in the workplace, that doesn't end well.
Yeah, because someone has to make a decision on something.
Well, someone's got to win when it's a power play.
Yeah, that's a tough situation to go through. And there's one for you, is that if you're not sure, or you're just feeling, I like to use the word vibrations with people. How was your weekend? How's your week? What do you have for lunch? I've read this book. What was the last thing you read? Try and find that common ground or common interest. Is that you're just trying to, like you were, tracking. So you're trying to establish a sense of where, because you can tell when there's friction with people.
Definitely.
So establishing that part is that if you keep doing that with people around you, people are going to notice that. So they're naturally going to be like, okay, then this person isn't the way that I thought they were, and then they may reconnect in another way, and then that bound might be a little bit better. I've got a note here, and I'll bring it up in the book as well, is that, so here's the one that, and the real one question I want to talk to you today is that people, I don't know why, and I've done it previously and I've really stepped out of that issue, is that, so I now compare myself to who I am today, to who I was, to who I want to be moving forward. How can we help people stop comparing themselves to other people and understand that if you just are better than what you were, then you are doing well. You can be content. You can take that on as successful. Because if you see someone who's doing much more than what you are, and you feel like you should be doing more, or you compare that I should be that as well, then you're sort of losing that fight with yourself, is that you're better than what you were. So why are you comparing yourself to other people? What's that dynamic like in a professional setting, and why is it so common? People always comparing themselves to others.
It's a natural thing. So we do that from a way of bettering ourselves and positioning ourselves. So there's always someone better than us. There's always someone worse than us, and that's a normal. That's a normal human response that we all have in us. But it becomes unhealthy when we forget about the perspective. So if we look at things from everyone's better than me, or everyone's worse off than me, that's an unhealthy perspective. We need to look at everything. But then having that internal drive of saying, I want to be the best version that I can be. So you certainly got to compare apples with apples. You can't say, I want to be this incredible athlete when your body's not built like that, or I want to be this incredible salesperson when you're really good at a different skill. And so building the skill that you have and continually saying, like what you were saying, I'm better than what I was, and that's what you want to kind of compare yourself to, that can be a helpful internal drive that helps you to. So the comparison with others is an external drive, so that helps you to look at others and go, I'd like that. But the internal drive is that internal voice of saying, I want to be the best version of myself that I can be. Yeah,
and that's why we do have, with goal set, we have daily tasks. We talk about implementing new habits. What's one thing for you that, not a daily habit, but what's something for you that helps you stay on track with, you talk about being true to yourself. When you feel like you not step out on yourself, but you feel like the track you're on, you're like, things just aren't, you used the word congruent with me before. Is there something that brings you back? What is it?
So I do have a daily practice. So I exercise every day, and as part of my cool down exercise, I do a little practice where I say, so I check in with my mind. So I say, I want my mind to be loving, open, connected. Have I been that today? So I set an intention, but I also check in, how was I yesterday? Then I go to my mouth and I say, I want my words to be wise, life-giving, honest, connecting as a human being, empathy.
Beautiful.
And then I go to my heart and I say, I want my heart to be open, non-judgmental, accepting, kind, caring. And so for me, that's setting an intention in the mornings, and then when I go to bed at night, the other part of that practice is, how do I do with that? So not from a judgmental perspective, but just am I being congruent to who I really want to be?
And that daily communication with yourself, does that get overwhelming, or does that help centre you?
Yeah, that centres me.
Wow.
Because it's not coming from a judgmental perspective. So if I had a little judge on my shoulder, a little critic telling me you didn't do this and you didn't do that, that would feel overwhelming. But I have a coach sitting on my shoulder, whispering in my ear, saying, how did you do? So if I do wander from my congruence, that little coach is saying to me, you're better than that. So come back to your core, come back to your centre, be true to who
What's
you
important
are.
To you?
Do you need to apologise to someone? Do you need to correct something? So from that perspective, that's actually life-giving, encouraging, helpful. The other perspective would be draining and overwhelming.
Yeah, because even if you go set forth and there is someone you need to apologise for, you apologise and they're just like, well, you know, you get something very horrible in return, that you can't change that. And you just go, that's okay, I've done my bit. And then at the end of the day, when you talk about going, and you make it very intentional to go to your mouth with the words you speak and your heart with how you feel.
So I borrowed that from yoga, so they do that sort of practice, but I really like that because that's, to me, it's kind of like my body, mind and spirit, like it's integrated, it's a whole, it's the whole of me, it's all of me. And so I'm very intentional. I actually touch those parts of me as a way of reminding myself I want to be true to me.
Sure. And what is it? Is that emotion is energy in motion. And is that sometimes what we say, depending on the situation, doesn't come from here, it comes from that devil on the shoulder or whatever it is. And there's that reaction is that it's a great example for people to understand is that, so that's how you get comfortable with having difficult conversations in essence. Because you understand is that if I've worked through these different things on a daily basis, so the work never stops. And if people, I use the word threatened by that, because they're like, oh, if I have to do it every day, then what's the point? I thought that is the point.
That is the point, that's life.
And shifting people off that you've always got to, Apex Unleashed is about, the apex is a mountain, and that for every mountain you climb, there's another one to unleash. That's the whole point of it. Because I know myself, I learned a long time ago is that I thought it was just climbing a mountain to get to a outcome. And once you're there, then what? That's a scary question. And that's really hard to work out is that you can only live in the day. And a lot of the podcasts I've listened to and the books I've read, that's an action that a lot of people sort of like, how do you reflect daily? So I asked you about journaling. Do you journal? I like to journal now because it lets me sit in my thoughts without trying to fix problems. Why is it healthy to reflect on a thought and sit there without going into problem-solving mode? What's so important about that?
What journaling and what I'm doing there is what we call external processing. And so what that's doing is getting out what's going on in here. My belief is that we all have the answers in us anyway. So we all actually know deep down what is good for us, what is healthy, what is authentic, what is most congruent to who we want to be as human beings. And so the reflection process rather than the judgment process actually helps uncover that. That's
a big deal. I don't normally do this, but I'm gonna throw it over and be like, do you have any questions for me before we keep going? Because we've had a few conversations and I'm really enjoying where we're going with this, and we're just about to wrap up, but you might, because knowing you've listened to everything I've said. Do you have any questions for me at this point?
I'm interested in what you hope to give and get out of this process with your podcast. Yeah,
definitely. So we'll probably do an outro of after this and explain this in more detail. So I'm hoping what I can give to our listeners and our followers and people that subscribe, and please make sure you do like and subscribe. I will have some information below on our channel. I'd like to be able to provide people the context of that you're not alone in your thoughts. We all feel this way. We all go through things, and if there's a platform where there's a few people that listen to this in 3 years, 5 years time, and they understand and it helps them get through their day, and that's an obvious outcome that I'd like to enjoy. But the main thing that I get out of this, honestly, is a mental health thing. How do I grow? How do I learn? So I observe, I listen, I ask questions, I get responses, my brain percolates, and I leave these conversations just so excited. I get more out of my day.
Me too.
People get a sense of like, what did you accomplish today? People know when I've done a podcast, they're like, dude, did you just do a podcast? That's the best feeling, because you talk about energy and connection, because I'm connected to myself. So yeah, very selfish. I get very connected by doing this. And selfish is probably not the right word, or immediate reflection, is that what I get out of this is so valuable for how I interact with people moving forward, because I can impart what I've learned. And if someone asks you a question, because you get to a point sometimes where people come and ask you things and you're like, you respect me to ask me that question? That's a nice feeling. So how do I reflect that into other people? We talk to successful salespeople, we talk to, entrepreneurs and fitness people, e-commerce. There's some of the people that I'm going to talk to, live a very, I suppose, a life that most of us would be like, how do you just be in your element and be such a minimalist, and how does that make you happy? Because we all get compelled to have more and be more and do more, because that makes them happy. The absence of other people is like, I don't understand that. We're social beings. So I'm so curious by people, and I'm so glad you asked that question, because talk about authenticity around people and connection, is that I feel now in this forum, and talk about social media and the world we're in, is that how do I connect with people now? I spend most of my day responding and reacting to a few different things. So we get paid to solve problems, and I like that part of me, but how do I work in a sense where I'm just not putting out fires? Can I provide something back of value? So yeah, I really appreciate that. And we didn't script that, by the way, we just come up with it. And that's the beauty of doing these things live, is that, we want to be able to show people that, we're here to try and not just put on something of content of value that we can put online and say, hey, look what we've done, we've achieved something. But it's more of like a sense of this helps us with being, it gives us more. Yeah. So speaking of giving more, how can people find you online? You have a website?
MerieBurton.com.au.
Yeah, and I've read a lot of information that's come on there, and it's great to sort of go through. They can book sessions with you on that as well. I think there's an online platform. I suppose wrapping up the last couple of things, and I suppose it's a beautiful thought to talk about, is that people talk. I want this last question to talk about self-love. So today is an expression of that for ourselves. Why do people, I see it and I don't call it out, why is that such a hard thing for people to go, I have to be happy with me, and I can't seek it from a car, a house, a phone, a new device? Why are we seeking self-love in an object and not in ourselves? Why is it so? And I know it's hard, because I haven't perfected it by any stretch of the imagination. I'm a work in progress. You do things daily. Why is that happening all the time?
We are saturated with media that tells us we need more. We're not good enough. We're not pretty enough. We're not handsome enough. We're not buff enough. So we're saturated with message that tells us all the time that will make us happy, that will help us to feel loved. Self-love is about having compassion, empathy, genuine care for oneself. The way that I practice self-love for me is that my natural personality, my way of being, is that I love people and I love to give. I love to give and to help people and to be there for people. And if I don't look after me, I will be no good for them. And so part of my job is to say I will do the best that I can to get enough sleep, to eat well, to exercise, to take care of my mind, to look after me. And that's not selfish, because that will allow me to have enough energy to then give to the people that I love and care for, and to my job. My job takes an incredible amount of energy, and so that I can do my job well and genuinely and congruently, I must look after myself. So I think for us as human beings, we have been socially conditioned to believe that that is called selfishness, and that is not selfishness, that is self-care, so that a person can genuinely give and love and be for family, for friends, for work. And then the tough conversation out of that is then, if you're doing that for you and you're getting feedback from a loved one that you are selfish and that self-love
doesn't work is that how do you just, well, not let, but that's the tough part, is that self-love is so important. If you get pushback, then obviously that's something you look, I understand we have different views, but I just have to love you where you are and continue on my journey because thank you for that feedback, but I'm not going to stop something now because you've said something that just opposes me at my core. And I've seen people give up on their dreams just because of someone that's they respect their opinion has had a bad day, they didn't get enough sleep, they didn't train, they ate poorly, they were hungover. People hang on to that one comment for so long, and there's so many huge things that come up from there. And just touching base on self-love is that for people that go, oh well, what's the point? And why do I do that? And there's plenty of successful people that don't, love, use that self-love when it comes to habits and things like that, but they're still very successful. You talk about judgment in your daily practice. When it comes to self-love, how do we make sure that judgment, because we're conditioned and programmed to a lot of things, to judge, I suppose, about whether I'm going to purchase this or do that or go with that brand. How do we help people understand that judgment isn't as important, that judgment of someone to you isn't that important? How do we have that stability of like, I hear what you're saying, but I'm going to continue on my journey? Because it's so quick to stop when we get that friction.
So authenticity then is really important, because when you were talking before and you were saying, if a loved one pushes back on that, I was thinking, if my loved one said to me that is selfish what you're doing, then I would listen to what my loved one said, and I would say my intention isn't to harm you. My intention isn't to impact you. I recognise this is impacting you. How can we negotiate this? Because I want to give you what you want. I don't want to be selfish. And yet at the same time, in order for me to love you as fully and as wholly as I can, I need this. So how can we negotiate? Which is hard. I mean, that long-term relationship is tough.
Of course.
So negotiation is an important part of that.
Yeah, topic for another day, guys.
Huge topic.
Look, negotiation. And look, I suppose it would be easy to go to talk about personal relationships in such a small time, but that's a whole different, that's why you get on the website, you book an appointment and you have a chat and go from there. So guys, thank you so much today for coming to watch Apex Unleashed. The art of communication, and just recapping very quickly, is that, that connection between people, that authenticity to yourself. And I suppose people, when people don't doubt themselves, you're around them because they're true to themselves, their beliefs, what they do, what works for them. And it's a journey. No one has all the answers, and we're here to listen first before we seek to give advice and judge and do anything else. And above all, especially the gold nugget is that we can talk about negotiation another day and go from there. But again, guys, thank you very much for your time. We will have some more information below, but it's been great listening, and it's always something that you can always learn for. So please rewind, listen back to a few key components, comment below in the comments. We will respond to them. Until next time, guys, we'll chat soon. We'll see you later. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you so much for coming to today's episode. I always talk to people about my little journal, and this is the one I've got. It's not my first one, but it really is about your thoughts and actions become really important when you write them down. So don't forget to do those daily habits. They make all the difference. Please like and subscribe to all our channels. We are here to create and share content with you that helps you move forward in your journey as well, and we'd love to hear about your success stories.